Why do we fear the ocean? Have you ever been scrolling on the internet and you see an image or read a story, or maybe you were like me and played a game as a kid and you experienced a fear that was unlike normal fear? It's not like when you see a bug or when somebody sneaks up behind you. These things invoke paralyzing dread. But why? What I'd like to do today is explore our fear of the depths through film and look into the different reasons we fear large bodies of water. Hey, I'm Hound. Much better. Hey, I'm Hound, and we all have fears, whether it be something worldly like a plague, something more personal like a home invasion, or something even more irrational like clowns or bunnies.
That's your scary costume.
Bunnies frighten me.
Whatever it may be, phobias are something that we all experience in one way or another. I happen to have two major phobias. The first is that I'm afraid of heights, but that's not what this video is about. What we're talking about today is the fear of bodies of water, referred to as thalassophobia. Damn, it's hot. There's a difference between aquaphobia, which is the fear of just water in general, even including showers and tap water, and thalassophobia, which isn't a fear of the water itself per se, but the threats that it can pose to us. Millions of years ago, our ancestors evolved past the point of being aquatic themselves, witnessed one of their weird off-brand monkey-looking friends try to go back into the water and drown, and now we can't look at this picture without having an evolutionary fight or flight response to it. Cool. This fear was and is beneficial to our survival though, as are most phobias to be fair. Spiders, snakes, heights, oceans. They all pose severely fatal threats to us. It's irrational in our modern society, but we needed those fears in order to survive. And because humans are funny like that, we love watching movies that feature a primary focus on the things that make us afraid. Or maybe there's just something wrong with my wiring. So as it starts to get hotter outside, what better time to get our feet wet with aquatic horror and explore phobias than when summer is fast approaching? Grab your sunglasses, a towel, apply copious amounts of industrial-grade sunscreen, just me, and let's explore the vast amount of different sources of horror in the waters, and just how deep they can go. There are a lot of reasons to fear the ocean, or just large bodies of water in general. When humans are in water, we really don't have a lot of control. While being lost in a forest is a matter of navigation, walking by day, and setting up camp at night, the ocean is a completely different playing field.
There are no lines.
The water itself is very dangerous. Currents can become so strong that it's hard to fight back and do anything other than just be swept away by them, not to mention whirlpools and drowning machines. Finally, the sheer size of the ocean. It can take up to and over a month for some ships to cross the Atlantic, and those are ships that are designed specifically for that. The fact that a giant-ass vessel like the Titanic can completely disappear under the surface of the water in moments should put into perspective just how vast the ocean really is, and just how small we are when we're in it. A human lost at sea almost brings an existential horror to it, with how helpless the situation really is. And so the first set of movies we will be going over today are Strand-type films that are typically thrillers, usually having no real antagonists beyond the elements. I love movies like this, that center on a stranded individual focused on survival. A small cast and a small location is always a winning combination in my book. Whether it be the latter parts of Into the Wild or 127 Hours, isolation is one of my favorite topics to explore through and with film. But these films are of a different nature. The hopeless dread that encapsulates them by using water as an indomitable and impersonal threat is one that, for me at least, is unmatched in bringing the fear of isolation. Starting us off on an island surrounded on all sides by ocean as far as the eye can see is Castaway, directed by Robert Zemeckis and starring Tom Hanks as the FedEx employee who is the survivor of a catastrophic plane crash, washing ashore an island where he struggles to survive, with many attempts to conquer the ocean, keeping him stranded there. Castaway deals with how long someone can fight, Chuck is stuck on the island for several years, and his sanity is declining as fast as his hygiene. Attempts to survive feel futile, and there's nothing left to do but wait. It's a horrible scenario to be in, and I think this film does a good job of displaying that, while also still being a very entertaining film. Our next film is Life of Pi. After his father uproots them during political panic in India, Pi, his family, and their zoo's animals are all loaded onto a freighter set for Canada, where they run into a storm that sinks the ship, and Pi finds himself stranded at sea with nothing other than a lifeboat and soon a Bengal tiger named Richard Parker. Life of Pi has such a fun feel to it, an almost fairy tale story of survival against all odds, with the final moments of the film recontextualizing and giving new meaning to everything we saw. This is truly one of the best films I've seen recently, and I'm glad I watched it for this video. Featuring outstanding visual effects that both go well with the realistic and the more fantastical parts of the story, lots of colorful and beautiful shots all over, and a lovely message. How wild is the filmography of Ang Lee, by the way? I genuinely only think of him as the Hulk guy, but I'm always forgetting that his name is also on Brokeback Mountain, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and now Life of Pi. Damn! The film that I most want to showcase for this level of fear is All Is Lost. A man awakes to find that his boat is being filled with water after colliding with a shipping container out at sea. He acts quickly to remedy the situation, finding that his equipment has been damaged by the salt water, as he spots a storm approaching. These are just the first hurdles that he will face. All Is Lost is a film that I feel really nails the hopelessness and the struggle of being lost at sea. It has just one actor, Robert Redford, features very slim amounts of music and barely any dialogue, including a much-deserved and impactful F-bomb. At every turn, we are reminded that the main character is not skilled for these sort of scenarios, and is really just doing any and everything he can think of in order to survive. The shot list and the storyboarding for this film would be interesting to see. How they chose to depict and tell a story with very minimal dialogue or even music. This is a filmmaker's wet dream, pun intended. It's a very quiet film that focuses on its character and their struggles, and the result is a very relatable and engaging film about one man's will to live. Now, let's quickly go over some other films that fit this theme as well, where bodies of water are used to isolate our characters. A good honorable mention for a stranded film is Breaking Surface, wherein two combative sisters decide to go on a diving trip when a rock slide causes one of the sisters to become trapped deep below the surface. Breaking Surface has a lovely ticking time bomb and plays with its tension very well. No unnecessary animal threats here. Just good old thriller intensity. Good cinematography and a good score serve to help the viewing experience, as besides the several attempts to break the sister free, you could definitely argue that the film is very straightforward. Also, that dog sure as fuck can play dead. As we dip below the surface, I feel like I have to mention Das Boot, not to be confused with the 2018 film The Boat. This is the 1981 German film that follows German U-boat U-96 during World War II, as they face triumphs, setbacks, and several close misses with death. This movie has some girth to it for sure, but it's actually well paced, with tons of action and plenty of time left over to spend with its characters. The film has good acting, with cinematography that emphasizes the tight spaces, and a great ending. Speaking of submarines, they're kind of boring. What if we put ghosts on a submarine? We're talking about Below. A British nurse is rescued by an American submarine during World War II, but she quickly realizes that the captain's stories aren't adding up, as pressure builds in the confines of the submarine. Alongside Bruce Greenwood are Olivia Williams, Jason Fleming, Holt McCallany, and Zach Galifianakis. All were pleasant surprises on my initial blind watch, and apparently I have memory issues because they were pleasant surprises here too. This movie takes advantage of cabin fever, and uses it to depict several delusions and paranoia among the crew, with some top-notch acting on display from its varied cast. In a pretty tense film that definitely shows promise. A movie that's more horror than thriller, but I still want to mention it here as I think it's a better fit in this category than another one, is Triangle. A group of friends are out at sea on a boat trip when they spot a storm, but as they're attempting to get in contact with the Coast Guard, they receive a distress signal from a nearby ship from a woman being hunted by a serial killer. Triangle uses the Bermuda Triangle, as well as the expanse of the ocean, as the setting to isolate the characters while they deal with a slasher on a boat. Jason Part 8 wishes it could be this good. This film was a fucking gem to watch blind, and I don't think many people have seen it, so that's all I'm going to be giving you. Good cinematography, good acting, and a fun film that delivers. Now that we've covered the use of bodies of water themselves, what about when there's something there, lying in wait just beneath the surface? The efficacy of humans hunting on land is debatable. But for damn sure, we are not great hunters in the water. We can't breathe under it, and we have to expend a lot of energy just to stay afloat, let alone the fact that we really can't move that fast in it either, putting us at a huge disadvantage. So naturally, our fear of waters can be greatly attributed to the fact that we can easily get outmatched in another predator's domain, where they have better camouflage, agility, and unique skill sets to take advantage of their strengths. Even more scary are the predators that aren't limited to the waters, ones that have the ability to traverse land as well. So let's go over natural predators and their depictions in films, slowly going deeper and deeper into the waters, starting off with rivers, then lakes, and finally, the ocean. The first film for natural predatory threats that we will be discussing is Frogs. Released in 1972, starring Sam Elliott and directed by George McCohen, about a southern family afflicted by plagues of... Did I get you? We're actually talking about Anaconda. A documentary film crew sets out on the Amazon River looking for a lost tribe when they discover a snake hunter in need of a ride back into the village. Soon, it's revealed that the snake hunter wants to capture a giant snake alive, and is using the crew of the now commandeered boat to achieve it, no matter the cost. I fucking love this movie. It's one of the films that I grew up rewatching over and over. I honestly think that this is the movie that made me love practical and special effects in films. Obviously, that's evident with the way that I talk about werewolves, but I also go batshit for the snake design on display in this movie. Anaconda also has a stacked and very interesting cast for a 90s film. Jon Voight, who won an award for Worst Fake Accent in a Movie for his appearance here.
Gores with his tusks.
Jennifer Lopez, Ice Cube, Eric Stoltz, Jonathan Hyde, Danny Trejo, and Owen Wilson. Oh, and apparently Frank Welker as the Anaconda. I know it says voice, but I'm just going to be picturing him inside the snake like it's a suit from now on.
Just as we thought.
The film has its problems, no one can deny that, but thankfully it was shot competently and still holds up today for rewatches. The sparse use of CG isn't even that bad either, but as always, the practical steals the show. Now, when we look at snakes in films, it's very rare that the setting is on a river or a lake, for some reason preferring transportation devices that humans have made. Anaconda does have sequels, though, that aren't that great. Blood Orchid was fine. But that was 8-year-old me's review of it. However, I really liked the one shot of the crew walking through the water, and you could see the snakes slither between them. That's just imagery that's always stuck with me. So even though there's not much to talk about here for snakes, there is another land and water creature that gets a lot of attention in horror films. Crocodiles. Or alligators. Lake Placid. In Stephen King's backyard, a man is bitten half by an unknown creature, and thus the president of the Fish and Game Warden is on the case. Along with his ragtag group of bickering individuals, they try to uncover what is eating people in Lake Placid. What follows is a very fun and funny,
He said he knew karate. You hit him. I did, yeah.
sometimes action horror, mostly thriller creature feature film that gets carried by its outstanding cast. I so desperately want to go back to this time period, so bad. Imagine instead of a story about the Manhattan Project, Nolan had instead got all of those actors together for a horror film about radioactive shrimp or something. Can we just do more projects like that? Please? Lake Placid goes hand in hand with Anaconda with conversations around creature features. They released at the same time in history, and both spurred on not just franchises, but booms in their respective creatures' features. It's amazing that they never fought it out on the silver screen. Nah, that'd be stupid. Despite my love for snakes, Lake Placid is absolutely the better film here. The story at hand is very compelling, so much so that even if you remove the giant man-eating croc from the picture, I believe there would still be a good movie here. The chemistry between the actors, as well as the competent cinematography, really carry the film further than just your standard creature feature film would normally crawl. While croc and alligator movies generally know what they are and can absolutely be enjoyed when under the right influence, if you catch my drift, I don't think any of them come close to deserving a spot next to Lake Placid. As a werewolf fan, I thought I was starving for an actually good film in my subgenre. But holy shit, I feel bad for croc fans. It sucks that it seems as though snakes and crocs, and reptiles in general, have just been delegated to exist as B-movie go-tos. Besides the outliers in Lake Placid and, to a lesser extent, Anaconda, no one wants to give these beautiful creatures a fair shot at being antagonists in a horror film. Is it really that hard to just set up a giant reptile and then have a capable cinematographer and a few good actors carry a human-focused story? I guess so, since a lot of the films that I found for these creatures looked like this. Tragically, it seems as though there's only one predator in the waters that is allowed to be taken seriously in films anymore. We're talking about sharks. And what better film to showcase sharks than Jaws? Sheriff Brody closes down Amity Island's beach after a shark attack leaves a woman dead. But the mayor pressures everyone into reopening for the welfare of the town's economy. Soon after, the sheriff watches on helpless as a shark kills a kid at the beach. He then joins forces with an oceanographer and a shark hunter in order to put an end to the creature's reign of terror. Jaws is literally one of the best films ever made, cited as the spark that ignited the blockbuster. It was a summer release that would just murder the competition at the box office. Directed by young gun Spielberg, fresh off of Duel and the Sugarland Express, with legendary acting chops out of Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, and who could forget Robert Shaw in a role that would be ingrained on the souls of everyone who watched this film. Jaws also set forth the golden rule of horror films, and serves as its namesake, that being, don't show the shark. A premise in writing and filmmaking that, oscillating on an inverted wavelength with its counterpart of show don't tell, argues that by not showing the creature, there is actually more to be gained by letting the viewer's imagination do a lot of the heavy lifting. Jaws is what happens when you add competence to the concoction of what could be distilled down to a typical made-for-TV plot. Killer shark ravages a town, and it's up to the renegade sheriff to take him down. Except here you have Peter Benchley and Steven Spielberg at the helm, giving us a character-driven and well-executed film that broke molds and records. So much so that pretty much all creature in the water films, at least when it's a natural threat, are about sharks. And of course, one of the holdovers from Jaws' legacy is Vor on the poster. Fucking degenerates. Jaws would become the apex of apexes, sitting atop a mountain of imitators, but never to be dethroned. Shark movies that would come after Jaws, if they weren't being such blatant ripoffs that they had to give original writing credits to Peter Benchley, would find some way to spruce it up. It's Jaws, but with a killer whale, or it's Jaws, but it's a shark-octopus hybrid. Geez, they were ahead of the curve. But one of these spin-offs would become a cult classic that many still talk about today. So let's talk about Piranha. Released in 1978 and produced by Roger Corman, because of course, he'll be making a lot of appearances here, and sadly, he passed away recently. The dude was the king of B-movies, and even though 9 times out of 10 those aren't my gig, his influence on the genre can be felt throughout all of horror history and in a lot of the films that I love. He'll be dearly missed and long remembered. Piranha was directed by Joe Dante. See, you know it's a Joe Dante movie because there's Dick Miller, and the movie would wear its Jaws inspiration with pride of the highest caliber, or just not care. In this film, government experiments to create a Vietnam-era organic weapon create dangerous piranhas that have a penchant for flesh, and we follow our main characters as they race to stop them from reaching a summer camp. The film was never going to be busting any blocks, but it had charm and knew what the audience wanted from it, and thus it succeeded. The success of Piranha would spawn a sequel that wouldn't rip off Jaws 2, it ripped off Jaws 4, a statement that I was so sure of and had more than enough evidence to support it until I looked at the dates. The alternative is that Jaws 4 ripped off Piranha 2, and I don't know which timeline I want to live in anymore. And then Piranha got 2 remakes in the relatively modern era, that I guess were parodies of how bad remakes were at the time. I wrote that as a joke, but now that I think about it, maybe I need to rewatch them with that in mind and they might be better. But if you want a good campy shark film that can still take itself somewhat seriously, then it has to be deep blue sea. A doctor hell-bent on ending Alzheimer's discovers that a certain protein that can be extracted from the brains of mako sharks could potentially be the key to doing just that. So in order to maximize yields and expedite research as well as results for investors, she gives them brain steroids. You made sharks smarter? Sharks? You couldn't find like a starfish or a sloth? Sharks? This film is wall-to-wall filled with great actors, something seemingly common in these 90s aquatic horror big-budget films, even including LL Cool J as the chef preacher, with his little parrot sidekick, that is voiced by the anaconda from Anaconda.
Just as we thought.
The film is of course a sharks and water movie, but the setting of a rugged but technical research facility that's partially underwater creates a unique environment that allows for a lot of fun shenanigans, like the scene where LL Cool J is guided into an oven by a shark that then turns the oven on. At times this film feels so fucking wild, but I keep coming back to two things. It's shot well, and it's acted with sincerity and care, making it stand out head and fin above other films that failed on those two simple tenets. This is one of the funnest films to watch with a group of friends, and is the only shark film that I can think of that I'd want to mention alongside Jaws. Coming up on 50 years after Jaws, there are so many shark films now. So much so that we have sharks that aren't even in the water anymore. So let's have a bit of a lightning round as we cover some of the different kinds of shark films that you may encounter. Of course, we've got a lot of Sci-Fi Channel hybrid monster or monster versus monster movies like Sharktopus versus Whale Wolf. I can't even be mad. That's amazing. Films like Sharknado that combine the fear of sharks with the fear of bad movies. Recently, we got a tiny bit of a resurgence in the big budget films with Meg, that at least for the first one understood the assignment and stuck closely to its fake science B-movie inspirations, providing a pretty enjoyable shut your brain off and enjoy the action man beat the big bad in a very unrealistic way type movie. What I refer to as popcorn flicks. Spectacle over story. You know, generally the exact opposite way you would want to make a movie. There's also a bunch of similar stranded human versus shark films. Open water, 47 meters down, The Reef, The Shallows. Out of all of these, the only one I think I can recommend is Open Water, which at the very least tried to do something unique. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at with natural threats. Though I did try to find octopus or squid horror movies or even thrillers that took themselves seriously, and I really couldn't find any. I watched the miniseries The Beast, an adaptation of the book written by Jaws writer Peter Benchley, and it was an okay film, but being a miniseries, it had way too much time devoted to way too many B-plots, and was just a chore to get through. If you know of any serious octopus or squid movies, then let me know. Sadly, I think octopus and giant squid type creature antagonists are stuck playing second fiddle in much larger films, like in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea or Pirates of the Caribbean. I forget which one. Dead Man's Chest, I think? The one with Sean's dad in it.
I ran it under a cold tap.
I really.
Films like Anaconda and Lake Placid and giant shark movies like The Meg took inspiration from post-nuclear science-questioning giant creature feature films from the 50s and 60s, like Them, Tarantula, and Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, which all bear similarities to kaiju films. Speaking of, Godzilla is kind of a sea creature. I mean, he goes underwater in between his business trips to Tokyo. Along with these, we would also get ocean-based sci-fi horror films dealing with giant monsters in this era, like The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and It Came from Beneath the Sea. But giant monsters in the ocean go back longer than film history. The giant squid, for example, was long thought to be a myth before we could produce and record evidence of its existence. And then you have map makers for traveling seamen of the time who would mark treacherous areas of the ocean with images of sea creatures and dragons, letting them know to steer clear of those waters. Mythology is a subject that has long fascinated me. Why yes, I do like Amon Amarth. And how'd you know my favorite Trivium album is Shogun? Mythology is teeming with large sea beasts. There's the Kraken in Scandinavian folklore, and even Abrahamic faiths have the Leviathan. Norse with Jormungandr, Greek with the Hydra and Sirens, as well as Scylla and Charybdis. Japanese mythology has humanoid creatures with the Kappa, Scottish with the Selkie, the Welsh even have Afonk, that is said to resemble a beaver, crocodile, platypus, and a demon. You could say its design is avant-garde. And the Irish have Olafeist, that are sea serpents that most likely inspired the tales of the Loch Ness Monster, that would mix a bit of reality in with the folklore with tales of a plesiosaur, a creature that I had an obsession with as a kid because dinosaur. And sadly, old Nessie has nothing but bad movies depicting it, besides the Scooby-Doo one, of course. And it just seems that that's the way it goes, though. Despite having such a large pool of mythological sea creatures to choose from, no films ever get made with them as the focus, at least as far as I could tell. Like with octopi and squids, they're just background set pieces in larger films, if even that. However, there is one mythological creature that tends to get a lot of screen time in horror films: the mermaid. So let's quickly go over some of the horror films that depict mermaids. The Lure is a 2015 Polish film about two mermaid sisters who venture onto land and become performers at a nightclub. It's a musical horror film, which already makes it stand out, but it brings to the table a very interesting dynamic between the two sisters, as well as some really gorgeous set design. And if those don't interest you enough, then there's a lot of fish tits. Quick little mention of Guinea Pig, Mermaid in a Manhole. Directed by horror mangaka Hideshi Hino, this installment of the Guinea Pig franchise is a body horror film about a man who discovers a mermaid in his sewers, who he attempts to help by taking care of her in his apartment. I happen to love its grotesque practical effects and the story at play here. This entry sits directly behind Guinea Pig 2, that is also directed by Hideshi Hino, as my favorites of the Guinea Pig franchise. Night Tide, released in 1961 and directed by Curtis Harrington, is a very fun noir-like horror film featuring Dennis Hopper in the lead role. He plays a sailor away on liberty for the weekend who becomes obsessed with a woman who works at the Pierside Carnival as an attraction, where she dresses up like a mermaid. As he gets to know more about her, he starts to think that the attraction may be more than just a trick. This one was actually really fun and engaging, probably because I have a soft spot for Dennis Hopper. It also had a lot of gay undertones, and it's not just because the main character's a seaman.
Captain, you want me to pound you later?
The director, Curtis Harrington, was one of the directors whose work would later be coined as part of the new queer cinema, as he was himself gay and had relating themes running through all of his films, Night Tide included. She Creature is a made-for-TV production by Stan Winston. A sentence I never thought I would say. A husband and wife tag team duo of presenter and attraction at a carnival attempt to steal a real living mermaid and bring her back home. But seaside robbery typically doesn't go off without at least a few hitches. The wife is played by Carla Gugino before Spy Kids fame and basically carries the film on her back. She does a good job, but you can't ever forget that it's a made-for-TV movie, because if it's not the quality reminding you, it's the fades to black every few minutes. Also, towards the end of the film, you remember that it's produced by Stan Winston. So you begin to wonder why, just why, there is very little screen time given to one of his magnificent creations. Overall, I thought She Creature would be horrible. It's a made-for-TV creature feature period piece. That's a horrible combination. But it was actually serviceable. Definitely better than pretty much every other mermaid horror film that I've seen. So, yeah. That does it for the fear of predators. We covered rivers, lakes, and of course, the ocean, as we looked at films that featured natural predators as their antagonists, and finally dipped our toes a little bit into myth. But there's one last dive we need to make, just a bit deeper, where the waters begin to turn black, as we explore fear of the unknown. I've always enjoyed the thought-provoking stat that gets thrown around every now and then. Only 5% of our oceans have been explored. Now, this stat is mostly bullshit, I get that. Differences in what you would consider explored or mapped, yada yada, but it is very fun to think about from time to time. It draws to mind the parallels between the cosmos and our very own oceans. We can see into them, but there's still so much to be found. Which obviously pairs well with fear and horror. The fear of the unknown isn't only one of the strongest types of fear, but it's also one of the best tools to utilize in telling stories, concentrated and weaponized suspense. But it can go deeper than that. The reminder that despite thinking we're the most intelligent species, in the grand scheme of things, we really can't know everything. This is essentially what Lovecraftian stories, also called cosmic horror, are all about. They have a strong focus on things incomprehensible to us, things out there more complex and vast than we could ever imagine in a million lifetimes. I plan to get to this in another video, but for now, we're here to discuss how this pertains to aquatic horror. There are tiers to this, going deeper and deeper, becoming more and more unrecognizable as we go. So let's start off discussing humanoid creatures. Something like us, but much more primal. What better way to start us off with humanoids than with Creature from the Black Lagoon? Geologists discover the fossil of a webbed hand that could potentially fill a gap between sea and land animals, so they set out looking for any more fossils that could aid their research, soon running into a surviving creature who is trying to defend his home, but also catches feels for the doctor's girlfriend. While not as eternal as Dracula, this universal horror monster movie definitely has its strong suits, mostly being the actual suit. Anytime the creature is on screen, it's completely stealing the show, and the score is just going ballistic as well. The creature suit really is one of the best parts of this film, and the underwater shots of him are all so awesome and impressive. I feel bad for the actor though, because I just know that shit had to suck. The film also portrays its creature in an almost sympathetic light, where he's the one being intruded on and could be argued is just defending himself, as well as acting according to his nature, along with a sort of Phantom of the Opera, Beauty and the Beast style story to it, but these are nowhere near fleshed out enough, and the film kind of ends on a sour note, and rather abruptly. But what if we want a better look at the sympathetic love story that's hiding below the surface of Creature from the Black Lagoon? Let's talk about The Shape of Water. Set during the Cold War amidst the backdrop of the America versus Soviet space race, a cleaning lady at a military testing facility discovers the recently captured creature that is being cruelly studied. On her breaks, she frequents him, and they grow closer through their similarities in feeling othered by the rest of the world, until she finds out that they're planning to kill the creature. Directed by Guillermo del Toro, and starring Sally Hawkins, Michael Shannon, Richard Jenkins, Michael Stuhlbarg, Octavia Spencer, and the lovely Doug Jones as Amphibian Man, this movie is a powerhouse. Not just with the acting, directing, or the score, which were all phenomenal, but most of all I was taken aback by the cinematography. This is just one wet fucking film, and it gives it such a unique look, especially when combined with the aquamarines, contrasting with yellows and reds, that make the movie absolutely soar visually. The standout piece of this film for me is the story. It takes the story of the creature and spins a sympathetic perspective on it, while not delving too far into positive territory that it feels like it's a kid's film. It's still a damn good thriller, but enough of discussing a sappy romance film with minimal action. Let's jump to the other end of the spectrum. If we're talking about humanoids, then of course we're going to have to discuss the Roger Corman-produced Humanoids from the Deep. A cannery company experiments on fish, creating a growth hormone in order to boost efficiency, but the fish manage to escape their labs. As a result, a fishing town is overrun with murderous and horny mutant humanoid fish people that are killing the men and, taking the women. So it's up to the town to band together in order to fight back against the slimy result of corporate greed. This was a surprise, to be sure. Probably one of the most fun watching experiences I've had with a B-movie. I knew I was in for a good time when the film opens up by not only having the first kill be a kid, but then it kills a dog. And I was like, damn, they're really not pulling any punches. And then there's like 20 dead dogs. It's like the film had a bone to pick with the rest of horror films at the time. This film not only had brazen killing and bare titties, but the special effects were also super fucking sick. Slimy humanoids with exposed brains and dressed in seaweed. All that shit just looks cool. It just sucks about all the sexual assault going on. Alongside the murder, nudity, and good effects, Humanoids from the Deep also has an interesting story at its core. Definitely a fun film. What if I told you that Blumhouse didn't always release bad movies? You'd be justified not to trust me. So let's talk about Sweetheart. A girl washes ashore a tiny island after her and her friend's boat trip runs into a storm. She buries her friend and upon returning the next day discovers that something has dragged his body into the ocean. When she attempts to get the attention of an airplane that is passing by, her flare reveals something fishy in the water. Sweetheart stars Kiersey Clemons, who has the unenviable job of carrying the film almost entirely alone for the duration. The short runtime definitely assists, and she does a good job pulling it off. It also has a pop-up appearance of Emery Cohen. Sweet. The film sports an almost Carpenter-inspired synth score that goes well with the pacing. But what I really enjoyed is its use of color. I know to most people it'll probably be too poppy, but I don't know. I just really liked it. Combine that with the use of silhouettes, and this film's look was just right up my alley. Good cinematography, but great color. Now onto that creature design. It looks like a jacked mermaid with an animalistic, almost shark-like head. It's a facultative quadruped on land that would jump into the water to get a speed buff. That scene was fun. They had a practical suit that was used on a lot of the shots, with some CG and others to enhance it. Very few full CG shots from what I can recall, but they didn't stick out at all and meshed with the film very well. There's also this sort of abyss in the ocean that the creature seems to be dragging people into. I like that it didn't get too much attention, but damn, do I want to know more about it. I guess mission accomplished. Does this mean I'd die first in a Lovecraft story? Overall, Sweetheart is a pretty tense, stranded flick with a humanoid mutant creature antagonist and some awesome visuals that are going straight into my reference folder. Our final film for this category is Cold Skin. A man running from his past enlists to be the weather observer on a small island. After being visited at night by unknown creatures, he pesters the lighthouse operator until he gets some answers, finding out that the island is home to a race of creatures that aren't too happy about them being there. Good creature effects, good cinematography, with story similarities to The Shape of Water, but a setting more isolated and cast more concentrated. Cold Skin is a very slow film with bits of action and a thin layer of horror shaping it, but I felt the need to include it as it's one of the few humanoid sea creature films that handles the subject with care and wraps it neatly in a very basic to understand metaphorical package. That concludes my selections for that chapter. As we begin to veer away from humanoid creatures as our subject, let's take a look at the creatures that bear somewhat of a resemblance to what we may know, but appear otherworldly. Starting off with grabbers. On a secluded island, an Irish cop gets saddled with a temporary partner as they head to the shores where several whales have washed up with what seems to be claw marks all over them. The town soon discovers that it's not something natural that killed those whales, and it's got a hunger for more than just sea life. This film features an alien tentacled monster looking like an octopus with too many appendages that wants to eat humans. This was a fun little horror comedy with lots of self-deprecating Irish humor. Yeah, the Irish monster movie would have the kryptonite be alcohol. While being a horror comedy, the film knows the difference between the two, and manages to have comedic moments while not distracting from the threat of the creature. The visual effects aren't bad, the acting's good to go, and we even get some good cinematography here and there. A good bit of noticeable inspiration from sci-fi horror flicks of old, and has the fun plot point of opposing heads coming together to save the town. Another film is The Host. An unknown creature pops out of the river and attacks anyone in sight, including a food vendor who watches as his daughter is taken back into the water. Later, at a memorial service held for those lost, the American military find out the vendor had come into contact with the creature. He is quarantined for testing, where he receives a phone call from his daughter. He breaks out of the facility with his family in an attempt to save her. This film is exactly how a creature feature should be. In The Host, the focus isn't on the creature, like at all. Its focus is on our main human characters, all with their own unique struggles, being brought together by a single unified goal. The creature, whose effects are not great but not exactly bad either, generally takes a back seat, letting the true story of the film take hold of our attention, except for the occasional scene of the creature wreaking havoc, just to remind us what kind of movie we're watching. The general look of this film also sets it apart from its contemporaries. Compare the cinematography of this film to another similarly storied film like Rogue. They both released around the same time, but Rogue actually had a much larger budget. Most of Rogue looks like this, while most of The Host looks like this. Although, to be fair, Rogue did have amazing practicals and debatably better VFX. Yes, obviously a bit of cherry picking going on here and personal bias, but I hope it gets the point across that just because you're making what seems to be a lowbrow script doesn't mean that you can't bring vision and technical prowess to the table. And that's something this film excels in, taking it from monster movie fare to a passionate and heartfelt movie about a family from all walks of life coming together to save their family member from a giant fucking mutated fish thingy. It's one of my favorites. Our final movie we're going to be talking about with unknown creatures is Deep Rising. On the day of the maiden voyage of luxury cruise ship the Argonautica, and in the middle of a storm, a band of modern-day multinational pirates are employing a man and his modest crew to escort them on their mission to commandeer and sink the vessel, when it turns out something in the waters has already beat them to the punch. Is it Hawaiian? This film was directed by Stephen Sommers, who also has two movies that I can't not love, The Mummy and Van Helsing, so no wonder Deep Rising is so enjoyable to me. But can we take a moment to talk about the most stacked cast in the history of casts? We've got Famke Janssen, Anthony Held, Benny from the fucking Mummy movies, Wes Studi, Jason Fleming, fucking Kano, rest in peace Trevor Goddard, Cliff Curtis, Jimon Hunso, the older brother from Norbit. We've even got Warren Takeuchi from Lake Placid earlier. It feels like the least known person now is the main character, who was supposed to be played by Harrison Ford, but thankfully it went to Treat Williams because he knocks it out of the goddamn park. As for the movie itself, this is action horror at its finest. Despite being filled with all the good batshit actiony goodness you would expect, like riding a Sea-Doo down a tight corridor and using a shotgun to open the doors as you pass by them, the threat of the giant tentacled spiky sea monster of unknown origin is still treated as very much that, a giant tentacled spiky sea monster threat. Deep Rising was also a sort of byproduct of the giant boom of underwater horror thrillers featuring an unknown entity that were all released between the years of 1989 and 1990. The Evil Below, Deep Star 6, Leviathan, the Roger Corman-produced Lords of the Deep, James Cameron's The Abyss, and finally, The Rift. Dead Calm also happened to release during this period, but the antagonist isn't some underwater mutant creature hell-bent on eating some long pig for dinner. It's just shirtless Billy Zane. Now, twin films are a very common occurrence. 3 werewolf films releasing in 1981, Ants and Bugs Life in 1998, Deep Impact and Armageddon also in 1998, Finding Nemo and Shark Tale in 2003, you get the picture. There are also many reasons why they can happen. Influence from the real world, interesting coincidences with parallel thinking, or, more common than you think, there's a mole. See, seemingly in Jimmy C's SeaWorld, word got out that the Aliens and Terminator guy was gearing up for what would most likely have been discussed as Aliens, but underwater, as pitches usually go. So much like the modern-day production studio Asylum, hearing buzz about something potentially big and immediately rushing out a film that can clickbait grandparents hovering the bargain bin into buying the new Transmorphers movie for their Transformer-loving grandkids, studios of the time were wanting to beat Cameron to the box office with their own version of Aliens, but underwater. Or, they could have all been inspired by the recent news and footage of the discovery of the Titanic shipwreck, as well as advances in remote diving that would allow us to further explore the ocean's depths and what prospects that brought. Whichever works, I guess. Regardless, fans of underwater creature features were eating good those years, and we got a ton of movies that, funnily enough, were way more comfortably fitting within the horror genre than The Abyss would be. Deep Star 6, directed by Sean S. Cunningham and starring Albert from Twin Peaks, this film features a blue-collar crew working underwater when they blow open a cave system that unleashes an ancient beast. Yeah, it's Aliens, but underwater. Now laced with a bit of Friday the 13th, and it actually has some decent creature effects. Probably the best part about this movie is how great the characters and their relationships were. Leviathan. Directed by George P. Cosmatos, so this is how I learned that Panos Cosmatos is a Nepo baby, and his dad directed fucking Tombstone. Okay. Anyways, this one features Peter Weller, Ernie Hudson, and Daniel Stern, as well as Monk's second therapist. A ragtag group of blue-collar deep-sea miners discover something on the floor of the ocean that didn't want to be found. Yeah, aliens. You get it. This one was actually alright, and differentiated itself at least a little by incorporating a bit of body horror and Lovecraft to the mix. This is the closest we got to actually Alien but underwater. I had high hopes given the name, and especially the director. I just wish it were more original, or went in a different direction, as it feels like there's just something holding it back from being a good movie. And I so wanted it to be good. Now that we've covered humanoids and unknown creatures, there's one last descent we must make, going all the way down to the truly unimaginable. This is probably my favorite category of films here, and I wish there were even more that fit that I could talk about. There's something about Lovecraftian horror that just resonates with me so well. Forbidden knowledge, the vastness of space and understanding, something incomprehensible just fucking people's days up. Such a fun concept that doesn't get played with nearly enough in my opinion. So let's dive headfirst into the true unknowable fear depicted in films. Sphere. After the American military discovers an unidentified spacecraft at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, they bring in the guy who wrote the protocol several years ago on how to deal with this sort of thing, as well as the team of experts that he listed. Once they get to the ship, they find that it's not alien at all, and instead is American, and that aboard it is a giant, perfect sphere of unknown origin. We're starting off light with Sphere, a film with a premise that is so intriguing to me. It's less horror and more sci-fi action with some thriller bits. This is probably a hot take, but I wish this film had more runtime to flesh out the intricacies of the script, instead of somehow making an over 2 hours long movie feel rushed. Nevertheless, I saw this on a few people's lists for ocean and underwater horror, and I kinda agree with them. It's got a great cast of actors helping it, and a couple really cool scenes involving characters venturing out on the ocean floor, and a few interesting manifestations, while the crew goes stir-crazy and try to figure out just what the sphere actually is, and what it's capable of doing. The movie is based on the book Sphere by Jurassic Park writer Michael Crichton, and all the film did was make me really want to read the book. And that's a feat in and of itself, as I don't read. The Beach House. A group of people staying at a beach house partake in some eatable marijuanas when it exhibits some laced-esque side effects, as everyone wanders around, seeing pretty lights, feeling the smooth water, and then a mysterious fog rolls in. The next morning, everyone wakes up feeling sick, as things take a sharp turn away from normalcy. The beach house is engulfed by a directionless and hopeless feeling, shot very well with great practical effects, and a story that takes modern fears of climate change and twists them to become cosmic, with lots to talk about regarding aimlessness and insignificance. There's not much else to say besides this was an enjoyable film. Also, hi Jake Weber. The Block Island Sound. A man is worried after his father has frequent moments of unresponsiveness, as well as disappearing on his boat late at night with no memory of what happened or where he went. His sister is sent to investigate the strange deaths of fish around the island when the father disappears again. This time, he doesn't come home, and his body washes ashore. All focusing around the relatable story of a family coming together over the loss of a parental figure, both talking about Alzheimer's and their eventual actual death, this film was just what I was looking for when I started the research for this video. Slow burn, check. Creepy, check. Cosmic, check. Just enough ambiguity, check. The great atmosphere and cinematography put the icing on the cake, and it all ends on such a unique and bittersweet tone. This film was just amazing for me. Also, why the fuck do I know this guy? Oh shit, it's Jim Cummings.
That's fucked up.
The Bay. Yeah, I'm a huge found footage nerd, and I think this movie actually fits the criteria. Years after a government cover-up, documentary filmmakers set out to air the truth about what happened on Independence Day in one small seaside town. It features footage taken from the perspective of the residents as they are afflicted, suddenly, by a fast-evolving parasitic infection that is a result of a contaminated river. If you don't think this fits the bill for cosmic horror, then I can see that. I just think it's a good example of the no one knows what the fuck is going on and then it's too late type of Lovecraftian horror, as opposed to the ancient and unknowable gods type. The part of this film that gets me is just how quickly things can go to shit when there isn't a proper response in place, and it does a good job showcasing that. Speaking of cat named Redacted himself, let's look at an actual adaptation of one of his stories, Dagon, which is an adaptation of his short story, Dagon. But it's mostly Shadow over Innsmouth. After having visions of a mermaid, a man on a boating trip has an accident and is welcomed into the fishing village of Mboka. Yeah, that's basically just Spanish for Innsmouth, where he slowly starts to unravel what's really happening on the secluded little island. Throughout this video, I've talked about movies that take a concept that could very easily be a typical B-movie flick, but treat it with care and with gravity in a way that elevates it above being just that. This movie sadly cannot escape the suction-cupped tentacles of its low budget, cinematography, and acting. If I had to sing the praises of this film for something, it would have to be the wet and gloomy atmosphere. And of course, the practical effects on display, but sadly they're not used as much as they should be. However, Dagon still deserves a mention, as all in all, it's an enjoyable movie, and of course it is an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation directed by the man himself, Stuart Gordon. And doesn't the main character kind of look like Jeffrey Combs? I guess I'm just a little salty over the fact that I crave stories like this, but being as there is little market pool for them, studios aren't really going to be taking many chances on bringing a near-faithful Lovecraft adaptation to the screen. But there are some films that get damn close to doing it, so let's move along. Sea Fever. After drifting into an exclusion zone, a fishing boat is taken hold of by a giant glowing creature on the sea floor. Once they're freed from the creature, they begin to head back, but not before discovering a possible infestation aboard their boat. On my initial watch when it came out, I had no idea what to expect, and was pleasantly surprised. Instead of being a gore-filled creature feature akin to a film like Leviathan, Sea Fever is an almost slow-burn thriller featuring a cosmic entity lurking beneath the depths. It plays a lot with paranoia and cabin, or I guess in this case, sea fever. A very interesting film with lots of beautiful water shots and an atmosphere that, while starting off inquisitive and exploratory, as the film progresses it becomes filled with despair and gloom. It was such a unique experience that it didn't go the direction that I thought it would, while continuing to hold my attention around every corner, that I just enjoyed it that much more. Underwater. When drilling into the bottom of the Marianas Trench, a research facility experiences an earthquake and suffers catastrophic damage. The crew's last hope is walking across the seafloor in their diving suits in an attempt to make it to the remaining escape pods. They soon discover that it might not have been an earthquake that destroyed their facility, and they're not alone at the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean. Underwater is a film that takes a disaster action movie framework and injects it with 10 cc's of Lovecraft straight into the veins. This isn't even a guess, or even a, well, if you think of it this way, it's Lovecraft. No, literally. This is straight up Cthulhu. I mean, you could argue that it's just one of Cthulhu's cousins or something, but regardless, it's an actual fucking ancient one, which surprisingly is rare in these movies. The movie starts off right away with action and never lets up, constantly shifting and changing while not overstaying its welcome. While it's not the best it could have been, I feel like I can at least appreciate it for what it is. A prime popcorn flick with fed-up Kristen Stewart versus Cthulhu, a lot of action, and a lot of really cool shots. That's a triple entendre. Our final film, and the one that I feel plays with cosmic horror the best, is The Lighthouse. The day before two lighthouse operators are set to be picked up from their post, a storm swiftly approaches, leaving the two men stuck on the island until another is sent for them, with no idea of how long that may be. As tensions rise, the isolation slowly gets to them, and sanities begin to falter. I love films where there's a small location and a very limited cast. The Lighthouse takes place entirely on a small island with only 2 actors involved in the story, and it does amazing things within those limitations. Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson are outstanding in their roles, and there's not a dull moment between them. There's also a mermaid. Whether hallucinated or not, it's there. Along with the amazing acting and direction, the cinematography really shines here. At moments visually striking, burning the images into your mind, and yet peaceful and serene when need be. This is a movie that's very difficult to identify. It's part horror, part character study, part psychological thriller. It even has some comedy littered throughout.
You're fond of me, lobster.
There's just so much at play here that it's hard to pick a route. Regardless, the film deals a great bit with identity and sanity, especially in isolation, with moments and even the climax of the film hinting at Lovecraftian inspirations. One thing I specifically enjoy about the film, together with all the mythology, is how it takes something like the Smalls lighthouse incident that sparked many myths and conspiracies as to what may have occurred, and it shows similar possibilities throughout the film, all of them with their own weight. Was it madness? Did they kill each other, or did they just starve? It's the right amount of ambiguous for my liking. Everyone can walk away with their own theories, and the film is just that much better for it. This truly is a phenomenal film. If films weren't made or consumed about the fears of the depths, then would we as a collective still be as afraid of it as we are today?
There's a reason that did for X what Jaws did for the oceans or water is a thing. Jaws legitimately instilled the fear of the ocean, and especially sharks, into thousands of people. People who most likely would not have had that fear, if not given a reason to, by films.
It's an interesting thought. I personally think that we wouldn't. It's like clowns. A lot of people watch scary clown movies or episodes of TV shows as kids, and that phobia persisted through to adulthood in one way or another. If we didn't view media that showed us the dangers of bodies of water, I think the number of people affected by thalassophobia would be noticeably lower. Basically, for better or worse, these movies have kept the fear of the depths going strong. But obviously I'm not complaining. I actually want more of these films to be made. What I'm always on the lookout for, and what I'd really like to see, is a true Lovecraftian aquatic horror film. Seldom a glimpse at the antagonist, if it even has a physical form to begin with, and a focus on a group of characters losing their sanity at the cusp of forbidden knowledge. And of course, because I'm me, lots of lingering shots.
Also, feature-length version of SCP-3000 when?
That would be perfect for me, but I'll settle for an actual Leviathan horror film with a giant underwater eel or snake. I'm easy.
Whether it be the isolation, predators both natural and unnatural, or the cosmic horrors that could lie within. I have long had a deep-rooted fear of the waters, but I also find it beautiful. Monsters and all.
I sincerely wish more aquatic horror films would be made. As much like the fact that there's so much of our oceans that have yet to be properly explored, I feel that there's so much more that this wonderful category of horror films has to offer, and we've really only touched the surface. I've been Hound. Later.